What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 90 of the Noizze Podcast, brought to you by Noizze.co.uk and sponsored by Stereo Brain Records. I am your host, your boy, Chris Pugh, and I am joined, as ever, and for the first time in 2022, by my very good friend and Mr. Cynical himself, Samuel Lewis, in his brand new abode. Mate, how are we?
I'm very well, thank you. I thought I'd try out the possibility of actually sitting on a sofa and doing the podcast. I thought I'm going for the Joe Rogan vibe today.
And is that working for you?
It's fantastic because when you speak, I can sit back and do this like a therapist. It's absolutely marvelous. No, it's lovely to be back once again in 2022. And amidst all the change, one thing is consistent, and that is me and you chatting enormous amounts of waffle about the best and worst in alternative music, and that's not going to change.
If you have wondered why we haven't come back earlier this year than usual, we would normally come back at the start of the year. However, Sam, as we can see, and I've alluded to, is in a new house. I didn't want to put the pressure on you, Sam, of recording a podcast in the midst of moving. I think it might have seen you off, mate, to be honest. The amount of stuff that you had to juggle. If it would have been like, here's 2 albums I need you to listen to, and an interview that we're doing, as well as the 50 other things you have to do right now. It's probably one of the nicest and the only nice thing I've ever done in our best friendship for you.
Yeah, it's the text message chain that led to that conversations, that led to that decision is going on my fridge. Actually, I want to look at it fondly every few days or so.
It's a great piece of fortune.
Remember the kindness you offer me when in 3 months' time you're saying you need to listen to this German industrial band by next Wednesday, and we're also interviewing the timpani player from this Finnish jazz metal group. And I'm like, great, fantastic, this is going to be wonderful.
We should mention, and as you can see by the title of this episode, we have interviewed Will Putney. That interview took place about a week or so ago. Very, very excited for you guys to hear that. Will Putney, how many times have me and you spoke about the brilliance of Will Putney, his importance in alternative music, in the alternative music zeitgeist at the moment. So as you can see from that title, we will be interviewing Will Putney on this episode. We will also have reviews on new Venom Prison record and self-titled debut record from Abhoria. We're going to talk about When We Were Young Fest, and we're going to talk about the very, very awfully sad news of Every Time I Die's demise. Before we do that, we are, of course, the Noizze Podcast. We post every other Tuesday. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, basically wherever you listen to or watch podcasts. Me and Sam will be there. The best way to support us is by subscribing or liking/following, depending on whichever podcast service you use. You can also follow me and Sam on Twitter at Noizze Podcast. Both me and Sam run that account. There's no reason for us to hang on, Sam. I want to get things going right away, 2022, and here we go. When We Were Young Festival is taking place in October 22nd and 23rd in Las Vegas. Now, usually, unless it's download, we don't really talk about festival announcements, but this one kind of took social media by storm because of its lineup, and how could we not discuss it? So I'm not going to discuss every single band that's on the bill, because I'm going to be honest, that would be the entire podcast. What I will do is just pick out some of the highlights. So, My Chemical Romance, Paramore, Bring Me the Horizon, A Day to Remember, Avril Lavigne, Taking Back Sunday, The Story So Far, Mayday Parade. Looking here, and basically it's like a who's who of just mid-2000s to mid-2010s huge bands. State Champs, 4 Years Strong, Amber Lynn, Knocked Loose, of course. How could I miss out Knocked Loose? Senses Fail, Dance Gavin Dance, Sleeping with Sirens, La Dispute. Dude, Jimmy Eat World as well. Dude, I don't think I've ever seen a festival lineup like this that is so stacked for one particular genre. I know that Knocked Loose are, of course, a hardcore band in the midst of what you would perhaps call quote-unquote emo, although I'm not entirely sure I'd be happy with that kind of generalisation. Regardless, Sam, I don't think I've ever seen a festival bill so stacked for one specific genre.
No, me neither. I think they certainly know their target audience, don't they? Late 20s alternative rock fans with enough money to be able to go to this. And from the band's perspective, the Vegas piece surely is one of the big elements that have pulled all these bands in. The prospect of playing in a place like that is attractive, and clearly it's a well put together festival for that particular audience that you're putting together. it's perhaps not the most 2021 friendly, 2022 friendly festival bill. I mean, you were talking about it on Twitter, and I have to agree with you. When was the last good album that any of these bands have put together? It's not really a band. It's not really a bill full of recency bias at all. It's a very nostalgic one with really only knocked loose of the bands that one of the bands that you mentioned, Bring Me the Horizon, obviously, that have been really good and relevant in the last sort of 18 to 20 months or so. But for a festival lineup, for what you want out of a festival, if you're of a certain disposition, this is a dream, isn't it? This is a dream. I know a lot of people that would be incredibly interested in going if maybe the practicality would be a bit of a barrier. But I mean, if you're a rock fan in 2006 and you're writing out your ideal festival lineup, you probably write this one, to be honest.
Now, I mentioned actually on Twitter, which you just alluded to, basically, I feel like 40% of this lineup have released a good or great album in the last 5 years. I did have someone respond to the tweet and say, I don't really think that's the point, though. And I do agree that it's not the point. Yeah. This festival is not about relevancy. It's literally called When We Were Young. It's just an observation that I had made. Now, it wasn't just the lineup that I wanted to talk to you about. I want to talk about the specifics of the festival. So, general admission, $245. Right, for a day. So I'm gonna, what is that in pounds? £220, £215. I'm not quite sure what the conversion rate is for dollar and pound at the minute, but let's just say £220 for one day. Quite a lot of expense. Now, when you look at the size of the bill, Sam, and this is over one day, and this is where I'm starting to get concerned for the festival now, because supposedly, and obviously I don't know this, but this is kind of the rumor and innuendo, we're looking at 25 to 30 minute sets. There's going to be a multitude of stages. Obviously, it's going to be in a huge festival ground in Vegas. So if you're desperate to see, I don't know, Neck Deep, who are on one stage on one side of the field, and the second day finish, Not Loose start on the stage on the other side of the field, Not Loose are only going to play for 25, 30 minutes. You're definitely going to miss 50% of the set if you're lucky, maybe even 60, 70%. So there's that we need to think about, as well as, now this is the main thing that's concerning me about this festival. I don't know whether this is true, but there seems to be, I'm not sure whether they're doing it for a joke, but there seems to be a lot of bands or members that I've seen, or band members I've seen on Twitter being like, we didn't even know we were playing this until we saw our logo on the sheet.
Yikes, that is not good, is it? That's not ideal.
No, it's not ideal at all. Now, also, what I think is strange is they've added a second day to the festival. Now, if they were going to add a second day to the festival, wouldn't it have made more sense to split the bill in half and have half play one day and half play the other day? Now, obviously, I'm not.
Is that what's happening now, though, with the increase of second day? Surely bands are going to be shunted over to a second day, aren't they?
They haven't announced that. It's the fest that they haven't, with the extra date, they haven't said, and this means that Bring Me the Horizon and Avril Lavigne headline the Sunday, and A Day to Remember, My Chemical Romance and Paramore headline the Saturday.
That's the only way this can work, though. That has to be the case.
I don't think that's the way they're going to do it.
What's the second day for then? What is a festival and then not stand around a bit on an empty field? Like, there's got to be stuff going on. There's got to be bands. There has to be.
Well, it's sold out both days, so my assumption is that tickets, which and I would expect the tickets to fly out day where the second they go on sale, literally just burn away in seconds. So they thought, right, well, we'll put a second day on if you couldn't quite get to the first. I think that's their plan here. But I'm going to be honest, Sam. Now, God, it kind of seems I'm just like the bitter guy who's trying to be edgy on the internet. I'm going to make a claim now, dude. I think this festival is going to be a disaster. I don't think something's going to not work about this. I feel like October 22nd and October 23rd on social media, alternative music social media is just going to be rife with this was poorly planned, this didn't work, this band didn't show up for the set, this didn't work. I can't see how this goes off without issues. Now, it's being done by Live Nation, who, if someone's going to run a festival, you would want Live Nation behind it. So in terms of the organisers, they probably couldn't have gone for a better organisational team than Live Nation. But even with that said, Sam, I don't see how this works without a hitch going on. I hope it does. If I could, I would absolutely be going to this festival. If I could, if I lived in Vegas or I lived near Vegas, or I had the opportunity to go. If I had the opportunity to go, I would go, and I hope that it goes off without a hitch. But Sam, let's call it what it is. This festival's not going to go off problem free, is it?
I think your assessment that they've hired Live Nation to help organise it is fair. However, I would add that the biggest issue I see is not the fact that Live Nation involves, that the Live Nation are going to have to deal with people who run Vegas, and I don't think people who run Vegas have got a great deal of expertise in running a festival. That's the problem. I think that Las Vegas has never had music festivals. Las Vegas does fights and that type of stuff. They've only recently had an NFL team. They haven't really dipped their toe in this kind of stuff really ever. So it's not just Live Nation. You're also dealing with people who, people that own the land, and people that are having to sort of figure this out and liaise with are probably not very particularly experienced, which is why it appears that the person who's booked it has just listed every single band in a certain genre and just crammed them all in. I think the idea that it's such an expense as well, probably hinting at the amount of money that's being needs to be recouped here is absolutely monstrous. I think there's going to be some practicality issues unless this bill is stretched over 2 days. If they've added an extra day and they're just hoping to do that twice, where the bands play twice and that's it, that seems utterly bonkers to me. I agree with you. I don't see this going perfectly. Because really there's not a long history of a region like Vegas having this type of festival really at all for the first time without it, and the idea of that going off without a hitch, bearing that in mind, seems pretty minimal. Pretty minimal to me, especially as well that the idea that the band members weren't even aware that they were playing kind of already highlights a lack of communication that's clearly going to be a problem. And you're talking about like getting across from one side of the stage to the other to hear Not Loose and things like that. That is going to be chaotic at band change over time. That is going to be utterly chaotic if it's not managed properly. And the problem is as well is that because of the lack of diversity, you're not splitting the crowd up. There's not a third of the crowd. Like you sort of download, for example, a third of the crowd is watching an extreme metal act. In a couple of the tents, there's a second stage and things like that, and it splits it up. If you've got to have 80 to 90,000 people that are essentially all going to be on the same stage at all times and then moving all at once to another part of the festival, that human traffic is absolutely monstrous to try and manage and organize. And when is this supposed to be taken in terms of the month? Because Vegas is hot as well.
October.
Oh, that's good. That's good. At least it's not a summer festival then, because like if this is in July, people will be passing out and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's good news in October. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this unfolds.
I want it to go off without a hitch. I just cannot see this going well. Do you remember that when I mentioned to you Alt London Festival, Architects were playing in the midst of like rappers and that kind of thing, trying to bring together the concept of hip hop and grime together in a festival with alternative music. A cool idea. Supposedly the running of the festival and how it ran on the day was just a mess, just a disaster, just didn't work whatsoever. And I really fear that's what's gonna reveal itself again here. And like I say, the thing that concerns me the most, and I can't say that I know it for a fact, because some of the band members might just be doing it for a joke, but I have seen a few people mention on Twitter and a couple of people retweet a band member being like, Just saw her name on the flyer. Guess we're playing, which is if they are being serious, that is a concern. It's almost like impossible to believe, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like the idea that they didn't know, which makes me think they might be joking. But it's
I guess it's not like they're playing like a tiny venue as well. Like if you're playing like 1,000 cap venue down the road or something, like it's a festival in Vegas, is going to take some organisation and stuff. I mean, think of the equipment alone and all that sort of stuff. It's gonna be massive for this festival. Yeah.
Let's talk about some awful news, Sam. RIP Every Time I Die. Within the last week or so, every time I die, by the time this podcast released, Every Time I Die have disbanded. Reason being, well, this is the thing, right? So, it's impossible for us to know or comment on the reason why they've actually disbanded because there's so much that we won't be aware of. But it appears that, from what we can see, I'm not going to go into all the statements that have been released because there's been a lot of them. But it appears that Keith Buckley, vocalist of Every Time I Die, has been quite important in the demise of Every Time I Die, basically stating that he didn't really want to be in the band anymore and he's lost trust in the members. Now, if you go on social media, you can see Keith's statement. He actually posted a picture of something of a cease and desist that appeared to get sent to him. Steve Machici, the bassist, he has put up this long post about how Keith's story is not correct for XYZ reasons. It's got really messy. It's turned into a mudslinging match. I don't like that aspect of it, Sam. Just a quick thing that I want to ask you here, though. If Metallica broke up in 2003 and social media existed, can you imagine Lars Ulrich on Twitter in 2003 if Metallica broke up? Lars Ulrich would do exactly this, wouldn't he? I can just imagine Lars Ulrich going to Twitter and just going absolutely ape on James Hetfield.
Yeah, I mean, well, when Metallica sued Napster in 2001, there was Reddit forums and threads taking the mick out of Metallica and stuff. There was the equivalent of a social media fury at the time. There was like parodical cartoons made about them. There was like rumors spread that Metallica was suing other bands for using the E chord and all this sort of stuff, like that type of stuff. So yeah, the social media fury would have been insane. This is really sad.
Do we know too much? Sad. Do music fans get told too much?
Yes and no.
Does it break the illusion? Because
yeah, it does.
Yeah. When I saw Every Time I Die at 2000 I spoke about at length several hundreds of thousands of times on this podcast. That felt so special to me because it was the best festival set I've ever seen, and there was a unity you could see on stage that looked almost unbreakable. Now I find out that the band members have basically admitted that we should have broke up in 2014. Really, I didn't need to know that. Do you know what I mean? It really breaks the illusion. This is why I'm asking you: do we know too much? I think we get told too much. I like the illusion.
You can still have the illusion. It doesn't make them any less of a good band. I think this type of stuff is an inevitable part of music. It is an inevitable part of the creative process. Is the inevitable is the fallout from any type of music, from the Beatles downwards. There's always been a demise. And a fallout and creative differences and personal problems and drugs and all the rest of it that comes into play. And the illusion can still exist from Every Time I Die, because in 10 years, no one will talk about how they split up. People will just talk about the band. The illusion returns because it's powered by like nostalgia and things like that. Like look at Pantera. Look at Pantera. So like they broke up and they spent the last 5 years of Dimebag Darrell's life, like in a pissing contest with each other, and Phil Anselmo was giving horrible interviews to Metal Hammer, and they were talking about each other quite nastily and things like that. The Beatles did the same. John Lennon was giving interviews about McCartney and vice versa, where they weren't particularly kind to each other, and talking about the band in sort of open detail. I think it's nice to have the illusion, I guess. But what it does is it becomes a comfort blanket for music fans and things like that who want their bands to be these immortal gods that are like completely immune to weakness and vulnerability and creative differences. I actually like the other side of it sometimes. I quite enjoy that creative geniuses have that bitterness and pettiness. I told you that story a few weeks ago about Beethoven. Writing Fur Release, the second half of Fur Release, he deliberately wrote it complex because he'd fallen out with his piano students and all that sort of stuff, so she couldn't play it. I love stuff like that, but yes, it would be nice if every time I die we're together. Let's start there, and then also they were getting along. And this happening has obviously tainted a lot of what they were, especially over in recent years. But it doesn't take away the important thing, which is how brilliant the music is, and also oftentimes bitterness and poor relationships actually lead to incredible music. Like divorce and suffering have led to some of the great albums of our time. I mean, you use the Metallica example. I mean, how well did they get along with each other at any point? Yeah. Like when they were writing "And Justice for All" and falling out with each other during the Black Album process, it didn't change anything in terms of the music. It probably fueled that fire for them, and I think that's probably what happened here, where a lot of the anger inwards in the band probably turned outwards to the music for our benefit. Do we get told too much is an interesting question, because you can opt in or opt out of that type of stuff if you don't want to hear it, and you can maintain your illusion if you'd like to. But I like that the information's there and you can choose your own path with artists. You can choose your own relationships with them.
Let's not fixate on the concept of them not being around. Let's actually celebrate how amazing of a band they were. I mean, I've said that if there are two bands that I consider being the best band of the 21st century, Every Time I Die would be one of them, and the other one would be Mastodon. Just in terms of consistency of quality releases, Every Time I Die have released 9 8 out of 10 plus albums. It's an absolutely absurd achievement. I think that they're the best hardcore band of their generation. They're an inspiration to many. They will be incredibly sorely missed. If I put a gun to your head, are we going to see a reunion show before 2025?
No, that's too soon.
You think we might be looking 5+ years?
Yeah, they're suing each other. You know, they're family as well, aren't they?
Jordan and Keith are brothers, yeah.
So I think inevitably they try and patch things up. But this is bitter. This is deeply rooted. The stuff that we read a couple of months ago about Jordan being spoken about as being replaced by his brother in the band, and he overheard that conversation. That's not petty. That's something worthy of holding a grudge. I mean, like imagine me finding out that you were talking to somebody else about replacing me on the podcast, and then what, we're just expected to be mates afterwards. Yeah. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, how would you not think about it? Please don't do that, by the way.
No, of course, absolutely no intention. Just for fairness and transparency and balance, Jordan Buckley has denied that he had a conversation where he was talking about replacing Keith as vocalist. Keith says, yes, he did have that conversation. So who do you believe? And that's the problem, really. That's why I haven't gone into the specifics of why they're broken up, because I don't think anyone knows why they're broken up, really, apart from themselves.
I don't think there's any one reason. That's the thing.
There's probably that as well.
There's a myriad of things, isn't there? I mean, if they think they should have broken up in 2014 to stop the bleeding, then imagine what the next 7 years would have been like. kind of like a failed marriage, or a failing marriage, sort of being held together by essentially the success of the music and the adoration of the fans.
Yeah.
And then you've got to like sit on a tour bus with these people, like, 200 days a year, and they toured a lot.
Yeah.
And they went all over the place. So that's got to suck. So it's astonishing that it got this far. I think they will get back together, because bands do. Bands always do. And they've had too much success not to be tempted by the prospect of a return, or time heals all wounds and all the rest of it. But not soon. Not when they're sending cease and desist letters to each other and communicating through management and all this sort of stuff. That's going to take some time to muddle out. And as well, I was talking to Jack, owner extraordinaire, etc., about this, and he said, what's stopping Keith, who wrote pretty much all the lyrics and contributed to most of the songs, just having a side project and calling it something like Every Time I Died, and just doing it himself? Because look, if he comes out as Keith Buckley and plays Every Time I Die stuff with session musicians, what's stopping him from doing that? What's stopping the band from trying to replace Keith with another vocalist and trying to do it themselves? We could end up in like a Sepultura position, where like there's like, you know what I mean, where they end up just like replacing every member until it actually looks nothing like the original band. Or there could be a myriad of things that are still yet to happen. I don't think it's the last we hear of this. I don't think it's going to be like dead and buried and we never hear about them ever again. I just think that doesn't happen. Like, look at System of a Down. We thought that was done. And then they just turn up, write a few songs, and then disappear again. And then there's rumors abound, and bands fall out with each other all the time. And then, agents start talking, and money starts getting thrown around, and it becomes difficult to avoid. So I think there's a future, there's a positive future, but it's going to take some time. I don't think it happens this decade. That's my call.
Interesting. Final thing I want to add. The one thing I didn't like was Keith is doing an audience with tour in February.
Oh no!
And he's doing it with a journalist called Matt Stocks, great music journalist. He's got a podcast called Stokerfy with Jesse Leach, fantastic. Life in the Stocks is also a great podcast. Matt Stocks, I do very much respect him. But within a day of it being announced, Every Time I Die broken up, the narrative became, hey, guess what? If you want to get the lowdown on the situation, come to an audience with Keith Buckley. Now, I didn't like that narrative. The idea. Is that how
it's been advertised?
That was how Matt kind of says, hey, if you want to get the full lowdown on the Every Time I Die breakup, make sure you get a ticket for the audience with Keith Buckley tour. Not a fan of that personally. I just think that's bad taste. It is quite a sour taste in your mouth.
It is, but it's thoroughly unsurprising, isn't it? I mean, what's he gonna do? They're not gonna talk about it. Was he gonna ask his favorite color? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, he's a quarter. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is what it is in that sense. That's the nature. It's the nature of the game. I agree that it's crass and it is tasteless. But that is the nature of show business, isn't it? Which I guess this is an arm of, and metal musicians are no stranger to the dramatics either. So it's rough. It's rough. I'm very interested to hear what the band collectively do after Keith. There's nothing stopping them continuing in some form. There's going to be some legal arguments about naming rights and things like that, because that would have been hashed out in a contract when they're signed and stuff. And so here we are. I mean, I just think it'll take ages, but I think they'll ever to be back together in sort of a decade or two. If Guns N' Roses can patch things up, I think these can.
Absolutely. But more importantly than anything else, the greatest hardcore band of the generation. For my money, tied with Mastodon, the best band of the 21st century in terms of quality and consistency of output. They will be incredibly, incredibly missed. One of the great bands. We got on the bus late, but at least we got on there before the bus was stopped. What a band. They will be incredibly sorely missed.
I what's stopping them being called the greatest hardcore band ever? Who was the competition?
I don't know. I mean, that's probably the kind of claim that I could make off the cuff, but be worried that I'm really not thinking about someone or forgetting someone, or perhaps I haven't got like the knowledge of like 80s hardcore, like in the New York scene, to perhaps make such a claim. But they're definitely the hardcore band of their generation, and I would be happy to make that claim. Maybe a band like Black Flag or Anti-Flag would have like a say in terms of like their importance. But in terms of this generation, no one touches Every Time I Die. I'm just desperately and upset that they're not together anymore. Especially obviously that would they have played in 6 days anyway? Because I had tickets to see them with the current situation, the pandemic, etc. It might not have gone ahead regardless, but I was meant to be seeing them in 6 days, and man, it just such a bitter blow, such a blow. Gun to my head, I think they're playing a hometown show in Buffalo before 2026. Gun to my head. That is just complete conjecture, though. Obviously, I've got no basis for that opinion. That's just me making a prediction. There's a hometown comeback show in Buffalo, New York before 2026. It sells out in 5 minutes. There's tears, there's stage diving, there's fights in the crowd, and it's like one of the crowd. Hate 5-6 is there to video the whole thing, and it's one of the coolest things that ever happened in hardcore music.
We'll see. I think I'll take longer than that.
Let's move on to our first album review of the year, Sam. We are going to start with Dystopian black metal three-piece Abhoria. Their self-titled debut record is out on February 4th via Prosthetic Records. They are compiled with members from Ashen Horde, Catheter, and Vimana, so something of a side project here. Sam, I kind of picked this record because we were doing Venom Prison, and I had a look through what else was coming out around the same time as Venom Prison, and really, not a stacked release schedule really around the early February. So I thought, you know what, dude, we don't talk about black metal enough. We don't cover enough black metal. So I wanted to chuck this in there. Now, I don't want to do your review for you, but I'm just curious. If I give you what I think your summary is going to be, you can tell me how close out of 10 I was. So I think your summary of this record would be, it shows off the great things that black metal can be, while also showing some of the limitations of black metal and some of the reasons why me and you aren't black metal aficionados or obsessives. How close was I?
Yeah, I would agree with that. We give you a solid 8. I think it shows some of the things that black metal is good and successful for. But I also think that it also leaves a bit to decide in its own genre, as well as perhaps showing why me and you aren't massively into this particular genre. It has its moments of intensity and harshness and dissonance and things like that. There are some really, really enjoyable moments here, like I like Mount Banks' frantic riffs and things like that. And Byzantine Promises was a little bit enjoyable, as I felt like a real thrash tune with a nice followable melody. But for the most part, you have to like the blueprint to enjoy this as a whole, because it doesn't really deviate from it once it's established. And for me, I think good black metal albums expand upon the initial blueprint, and they go into the I like my black metal a little bit atmospheric. I like black metal with a bit of piano. I like my black metal with a bit of theatricality. To break it up, I like the Clyde the Filth black metal much more than I like this kind of black metal specifically, because I think if you're not a massive aficionado of the type of black metal that's going on here with the blast beats and the slicing riffs and things like that, it does wear out its welcome fairly quickly. It's if you enjoy this, then it's great because the consistency is terrific. But if you're not massively into the style that this is, then you are going to be put off fairly quickly. I think there's some moments of real intensity and really enjoyable, that are really quite enjoyable. But for the most part, it's consistent at times to the point of tedium at points near the end of this, because there is a a quite clear, very followable guitar line that really runs through the entirety of the album. The drum patterns are almost identical from song to song. Some of the lyrical patterns are almost identical from song to song, to the point where any deviation from that is kind of feels like a real breath of fresh air, when I think they could have had the opportunity to feel like it's a bit more creative. But if it's a side project, then maybe it should be treated as such, as like a opportunity for them to stretch these members to stretch their wings into a different genre, feel it out, knock some stuff together, and maybe we shouldn't be looking at it with the magnifying glass that we often do. But I felt this left a lot on the kitchen table from its own genre standpoint, as well as perhaps confirming that really black metal has its own limitations in terms of engendering new and curious audiences too.
I feel like Sunless, the closing song, is one of the few songs that is genuinely unlike anything else on the record, and does purposefully differentiate itself. Now the problem is it comes last. The problem is it comes last, and that's and for me, I enjoy this. I enjoyed this album. I think this is really, really solid black metal record. But by the time you get to the third track, The Thorn, I genuinely think you could play the opening from Mountbank, the song that predecesses The Thorn, then play the opening from The Thorn, and you could possibly be convinced they're the same song in terms of the opening. They do break off in different ways by the time they get to the middle eight, etc. But in terms of the opening, I think you could possibly be convinced that they're both the same song. And for someone who, and if someone's listening to this record and they're not huge on black metal, that is going to be immediately tiresome. What I would say, you mentioned Byzantine Promises. I think Byzantine Promises is pound for pound the best track on the record. I do kind of like the cool chant of Join Us to open it. There's a really cool galloping riff on the verse. They do a slow down into almost like a sludge metal song, which I really enjoyed as well. And then it brings in like quite a necessary shift to the proceedings. And then that final verse, when the pace returns, the intensity increases again, really, really, hits like a truck. I really, really enjoy Byzantine Promises. And actually, Sunless is a great, the song closing, Sunless, 7 minutes. Really different to anything else on the record. A more laboured and poised vocal sound from Welthrax, I believe his name is. His vocals are much more spaced, and there's a flitter of clean and spacious vocals as well, which really works. And there's a great build to a gorgeous solo. There's lots of really cool black metal moments on this album that you could pick out and just really obsess over. Like, it is, just headbangers factory, really, moments of this record. But there are moments where I was listening to parts of like Hollow. I listened to Hollow, which is the song that comes before Sunless, and I thought, do you ever need to listen to this song? Like, it doesn't really separate itself from the record in any way, shape, or form. But I don't want to make that sound like too much of a criticism, because it's a dystopian black metal record that fully throws itself in on that concept and stays there successfully. And I think that if you stopped a black metal fan on the street and passed them this record, I think they'd get a huge amount from it. Because I do believe this is a really good, solid black metal record that I did enjoy listening to. But by the time The Thorn comes in, it is quite apparent that there's a blueprint here that is marginally going to be stepped away from. And that can be quite a damning realisation 9 minutes into an album.
Yeah, I think I felt that. I remember listening to the first track, False Idol, classic black metal melody, and I was thinking, all right, okay, it doesn't really quite get out of third gear. It's a touch repetitive. That was track one, and I by sort of track 3 or 4 in the nicest possible way, the thoughts that we're having were the same sort of. Mountbank, I was like, oh great, so up tempo, frantic riffs, and then it switches back to the similar sort of blueprint once again. I enjoyed the head bobbing verse on like Grave Expectations, first really section that really grabbed me. And there's a melody at the end with the guitar solo with a really, really echoey sound. That was lovely. And that's the thing it departed away from. I don't want black metal bands to abandon blast beats and chugged riffs with 30-second notes, but I'd prefer that if it was juxtaposed with some other stuff, because it loses its impact as a pace changer. You can't have the whole thing at the same tempo because it does feel overly repetitive. Hell, even Slayer slow down. Like once in a while, you need to take away. It's like you need to be able to go back to it. You know what I mean? Like it's supposed to emphasize it in its absence, and it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that enough for me. Clearly some talented musicians here. And there's a type of music that they're trying to create, and they've done that. They've hit certain black metal blueprints right to the T. I would just prefer I'd prefer it to be a little bit wide, to cast its net a little bit wider musically, to appeal to a listener like me. But that being said, it is also fair to say that I'm probably not the target audience in the listenership in terms of like a black metal aficionado. I know that you're a little bit more inclined to black metal than I am, but even so, neither one of us would consider themselves like massive black metal fans.
No.
It like black metal has to be pretty special to sort of what I mean. So I will say that that's pinch of salt with any of the criticism that I'm offering here. But I'd be hard pushed to believe anybody saying that this would be like varied and really complex and layered and stuff like that, because I'll be like, are you sure? Is it? I'd find that hard to swallow, because the album that I listened to did feel incredibly similar. Now, if you like that particular style, you like that particular sound, great. You're gonna have a while of a time, because there's 10 tracks of it. But for me, not so much.
Let's move on to Venom Prism. Their new record, Erebos, is out on February 4th via Century Media Records. It's the band's third full-length album and the follow-up to 2019 Samsara. Samsara was an album that me and you, Sam, reviewed on a long time ago episode of the Noizze Podcast. Now, me and you saw Venom Prism. We saw them opening for Trivium back in 2018. What a wonderful time that was, because Paratrip and Code Orange also played that show. That was a fantastic time in our friendship, Sam.
Yes, it was.
We said these have got great potential. These could do something really great in death metal. Then we heard Samsara, and we repeated that notion that these have got great potential and they could do something really great in death metal. Not this yet. This isn't great. This is a very solid, good death metal record. But we basically said their best record is coming, and when that hits, we have a sense it's going to be a special moment for them. Sam, Erebos, potential fulfilled? I feel like it's potential fulfilled.
Yeah, this feels like a really good record, and it feels like that they've actually followed the Chris and Sam requests in terms of stretching out a little bit and what else can you do. I remember the review of the Venom Prison album. I remember describing one of the introductions like the drum kit had fallen down the stairs, if you remember, because of the clashing of the cymbals and the snares and sort of stuff. It was at times difficult to make out because of how complex and brutal it was. Which is no criticism, obviously. I love that type of thing, but this feels so much more a polished and professional record for Venom Prison. It feels like a massive and mature step forward for the band. And by the way, mature isn't music journalists speak for softer, because this is really, really heavy. Yeah, it is. There are moments where they've diverted and included different sounds, different ideas. I don't know where to start, but I want to start with something. There's like major keys in here, like there's like pleasant melodies in this album. There are very pleasant melodies in this album, and I was like listening to this. I was like, is that a major key here? Like, what is going on? This album is really, really, really tremendous. Has like a grandiose, epic Shadow of Intent style opening, which I'm a massive fan of. It's got, man, some of the riffs here and some of the transitions, beautiful. Just absolutely fantastic. Transitioning straight into great breakdowns here. There's some dissonant guitars and massive choruses. There are moments actually where this feels like a classic death metal album. This felt like I was getting sort of Carcass and Death and At the Gates feelings throughout this, which I am all over. But yeah, in summation, and we'll dive into it in some detail a little bit later, sort of on a track track to track, key track basis type of thing, but absolutely potential fulfilled. It feels like Venom Prison have matured and grown up and polished and sort of reached and evolved into a different stage of their career, and one that I do believe that is massively going to benefit them in the next couple of years.
Yeah, this is a great record. I love this. This is a great death metal record. This is, for me, potential fulfilled. This is what, when we saw them open for Trivium, what we said we believe they would end up doing has been done. I feel like this is a record they can walk away from and feel just shimmering pride, because the stretch that they've made in terms of songwriting is really almost astonishing. Like, if you take I'm going to try and pronounce this right, Pain of Oasis.
Yeah, I think it's Oasis.
Oasis. Yeah. I'm going to assume
Oasis, maybe like Ozymandias, but no, Oasis. I think.
Let's go Oasis. It is a single. It is a single. So most people would probably, if you've got an interest in Venom Prison, you might have already heard it by now. But then when you listen to it within the context of the album, it sounds even better, because it's got this kind of trance to leering backdrop to Larissa's vocals. It's brilliant. And, you know, we're hitting early days of the year, obviously, but of the 6 or 7 records I've heard so far in 2022, Pain of Oasis is the best song that I've heard so far. The pace change-ups when Larissa starts screaming behind the snare drum, brilliant. The kind of solemn guitar lines that fleet in between are beautiful. All builds this kind of soliloquy of fury by Larissa, which is delivered with so much, minus, excuse the pun, venom. It's just just incredibly capturing. I loved Nemesis. The pick scrapes that open it are just borderline horrendous to listen to, but it's so cool. Larissa's delivery of the opening verse is stunning. She's got a brutality in her delivery that is matched only by her exquisite precision of flowing through the lyrics. Thankfully, this was sent with a lyric sheet, and as you read through while she kind of bursts through the themes, it really is, her flow is just tremendous. Her lyrics are incredibly capturing, intelligently written. And on Nemesis, there's this moment where it kind of flirts with an instrumental in the middle eight, but then it quickly snaps back into this harsh verse. Coolest thing in the world. I loved Comfort of Complicity. It's got kind of more of a clean or layered riff. That's the real backbone of Comfort and Complicity, which I wasn't expecting. It's evident that they've pushed themselves. There's a kind of by artist murder feel to the lyric. There's a war across the border, works really well. An amazing change of tonality in the song's crescendo. It morphs from an extreme metal batter into a more terrory metal anthem. Really incredible stuff, man. And then you've got Gorgon Sisters, which is, I mean, this lyric: the misogynistic cogs are turning, grinding the uterus. Larissa's lyrics
what an image,
are just so scarring yet really intelligent, as she literally never misses. The guitar riff with a pinch harmonic on the chorus just sounds beast-like. The build to and then the following breakdown is gross, horrible, brilliant. And this record is really intelligent at picking when to include a real beat down moment, because there's not a grand amount of them. The album is heavy as hell. Please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. What I'm saying, it's not breakdown overload. They do really pick and choose the moments to put them in, and they always hit. They choose the right moments every single time. I think this record's really great, Sam. I really like this.
Yeah, there's a real technicality and a real complexity in the songwriting that was always present, but feels much clearer and cleaner from a day-to-day basis. It feels like on a track-to-track basis. It's just absolutely phenomenal so far. But what's taking place really, if you listen to the first main song, Judges of the Underworld, it's heavy metal sludging opening, it's groovy and grinding, and transitions straight into an incredible breakdown. And from there, already the band are doing so much on that opening track, Judges of the Underworld. I'm like, what? Like, it just keeps slipping from genre to genre to style to style. The tempo shifted breakdown to conclusion is absolutely fantastic. I really love Nemesis. The sliding echoed lead riff in the opening of that was fantastic. The clean transition into the snare roll tempo shift was really enjoyable. It's really layered and complex structures. There's just comfort and complicity is fantastic. That's the one that felt like an At the Gates of Carcass song. Love the melodic slow section. It's almost power metal reminiscent, and that's the thing that ends on this sort of major key. There's that bit, and then that you talked about Born of Oasis, maybe is how you pronounce it, perhaps, and the ending section of that, where there's a concluding melodic section. I haven't heard a band do something like that since Between the Buried and Me, in terms of that concluding melody, running guitar. And then they're just happy to remind you as well that Golden Apples of the Hesperides, I think is that Hesperides, is just classic Venom Prison. Flash, blast beats, nasty breakdown, never settles. The riffs are like twitching and snarling throughout, terrific sweeping solo, Slayer vibes at the end. And it's just another reminder that they can be one of the better extreme metal acts, as well as really stretching their wings and go into this at times progressive style. It's what this is an incredibly impressive record. This is a very accomplished album, and really shows off the depth of musicianship that they have in their arsenal. I didn't actually expect to enjoy this Venom Prism record as much as I did, because I respected them greatly, but they weren't really always in my favourites list, really. But listen to the drums on the opening of Veil of Night. Oh my God. That just absolutely incredible. I enjoyed the mid-tempo vibe halfway through, where it sounded a bit like In Flames at times, which I really enjoyed. Thoroughly in on this album, thoroughly in on this band.
I love this Venom Prison because they're not a band with potential now. They are one of the great extreme metal bands in Britain. Amazing. What else do we want? I think this record's going to do great things for them. I really think this would be big for them.
I agree. I agree. I think it pushes them into a wider audience as well, but also love it when bands are able to actually stretch the wings without losing any of their grind and heaviness, because I absolutely don't think they've done that as well. I think they've done a fantastic job of growing, but also sustaining one foot in consistency, another foot in growth. And I think that's a really great thing for them. Also, these are phenomenal musicians. Yeah, absolutely phenomenal musicians. Like listen to the spiraling riff at the start of Castigated in Steel and Concrete. He's just utterly phenomenal. And there are loads and loads of moments on that album that are like, oh my God, these are just incredible musicians. From the dive bombs to the drum fills to the changes in tempo. The degree of difficulty, once again, is absolutely off the charts, and it is both brilliant and brutal and complex and clear and just really nicely mixed and polished, put together, and just everything about it. It's a terrific record. Really great start to the year.
Huge win for extreme metal in Britain. Huge win for extreme metal, full stop. Because this is going to travel. This won't stick. This won't just be a big record in Britain. This will travel. This will go. This will be talked about across the globe, and so it should be. Right. Amazing.
It's wonderful.
Amazing.
Wonderful.
That's where we're going to leave off episode 90 of the Noizze Podcast. We are so glad to be back with you, but we don't go anywhere yet because our interview with Will Putney is coming up right this second. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. We're going to look at the release schedule, see what we've got coming out. We're going to be hitting you again with 2 new album reviews, and I am scheduled tomorrow to interview Ash Gray from Venom Prism. So as long as that interview goes ahead, our next episode, this one includes Will Putney. Our next episode in 2 weeks will include Ash Gray, guitarist from Venom Prism. As usual, thank you so much for listening. You can follow me and Sam at Noizze Podcast on Twitter. Subscribe to us on YouTube, or like and follow, depending on whichever podcast service you're using. That is the best way to support us. Thank you for listening or watching. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. Don't go anywhere. This is our interview with Will Putney coming up right now. We'll see you in 2 weeks. We love you. Bye. So we are now joined by Will Putney, the producer that me and Sam have without doubt spoke the most about since we started this podcast. Will, thank you so much for your time, man. This is a crazy honor.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you guys having me on. Excited to chat.
You're a man short on time, I've got no doubt. So, Sam, I'll let you start right away, mate.
All right, well, it's just, once again, I echo Chris's ideas that it's just a pleasure to have you on. So thank you so much. I want to start with, before getting into Fit For An Autopsy and stuff on your latest record upcoming, I want to talk about the production stuff as well, because you're such a prolific producer as well as a musician. As someone that's produced other bands as well as your own, how do you adjust the approach about being in the band and writing songs for yourself and then, helping the mix and the production value there? Or between that and being the producer, where you're almost either taking direction or you're sort of having like an external involvement on the writing process? Is it difficult to take a step back from a creative process that you know so well and are so familiar with?
I think they're just different. To me, they just fall into two different things, with the way I work and stuff. With Fit, it's more of, it's sort of like my creative outlet where, I'm kind of just free to do whatever I want with the band. And it's, it's more challenging for me from a musician standpoint to write and be creative and come up with things that I think are cool and exciting. But the production is pretty seamless because it's all in my head. I'm just doing what I want. We get it there, pretty easy at this point, on that side. And then when I'm working with another artist, like I'm sort of looking at them from the outside and seeing what their goals are, what's special about that band, what's going to make songs connect for them. So like I'm working with other bands as an outsider, sort of trying to find the things that I think work and are successful and, are the strongest traits for the given project. But with Fit, it's like, I'm just kind of doing what I want and I don't really have to think about that stuff. So they're different, and they both present their own challenges.
A couple of years ago, I actually interviewed Pat on the UK tour that Fit did, cool, supporting The Artist Murder and Carnifex. And it was cool because we were talking about Sea of Tragic Beasts and specifically Napalm Dreams, because he mentioned to me that it took a fair bit of convincing from yourself and other members in the band to really sell him on the idea of the song. And because this new record is probably, for me, your most outlandish release yet, did any such conversations have to take place this time? Or from the experience of Napalm Dreams, was Pat now like, no, I'm fully in on anything that could be what I would consider experimental for us?
Yeah, I think he's pretty good now because I didn't hear any slack this time, for sure. I think Napalm Dreams took a minute because we had a couple different, actually had rewritten the verses of that song a couple times. We had originally in that song, we were thinking we were going to have somebody else do the bit. And then we decided, no, let's not do guest vocalists. Like our first Nuclear Blast record, let's just come out with us. We kind of got off the idea of needing or wanting guest vocalists or performances for a while, So I was like, okay, well, I had it written with the idea of somebody else and I did it with Joe and it was like, it didn't really do what I wanted it to. So there was like back and forth on that song a little bit. I don't think anybody thought it was bad or anything. I think we were just trying to find the way a song like that could work well for us, So I wound up like rewriting a good bit of it lyrically, and then I think it all connected once we did that, But yeah, Pat was like afraid of change for a while. I think not for any reason than, anytime a musician tries to expand, it comes with like risks or, like pressure to, stick a new style, like as good as you were playing the older one and stuff. So I think now we're all like, oh, we're just going to do whatever we want. Like if we like it, we like it, and not really worry about what other people think about it. I mean, I'm glad people like it, but I don't care if they do anymore.
That's awesome, man. Because when I heard The Man That I Was Not, I was thinking, I wonder whether Pat loved this off the bat, like because of his concern with Napalm Dreams. I was thinking, I wonder whether Pat loved this song right off the bat.
He did actually. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't ever about like I don't like the song. It was more about like I don't know if we can do this. Like okay. I don't know if this,
Yeah, I completely understand that as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about the latest album upcoming. This new album is the first Fit For An Autopsy album since 2019, Sea of Tragic Beast, which I did a little bit of maths, which I'm not good at, but I'm trying to figure it out. which broke for the first time a pattern of 2 years, pretty much exactly, between each record from the process of human extermination right up until Tragic Beasts. Is there a pandemic reason why there was a lengthier amount of time between the last record and this one? Was this more challenging for any particular reason, or am I just creating an issue where there isn't one?
No, I mean, we the only reason it didn't come out earlier is because we honestly just wanted to wait till we could tour again. You know, we had this done. This was done last year, you know. And then we had a plan to put it out and do some touring, and then those tours got canceled, and then this tour moved and that one moved. I think in 2020 we canceled like 6 tours, and then all of 2021 was like a big maybe. And it took a minute to be like, all right, it's safe to like put a plan in place now, because the band, like, I don't think we'll ever put out a full length and not play a show on it. You know, like we had a taste of that with the Sea Attractive Beast. We only got to do 1 US tour and 1 European tour, and that was it, you know. So that for a lot of people in other territories in the world and stuff, they've never even seen us play that record, you know. So we knew, like, we can't do that again and be like albums and albums back where it was like never had a chance to give people a show with these songs, you know. So we were like, yeah, there's no way we're putting this out until we can tour again, you know. And now luckily, and you know, the guys are out on having a great time on a tour right now that's killing it. And you know, part of that is probably because we were patient and held the record for that.
It's interesting. So how does that, just to follow up on that, how does that affect the set list? You say you want to tour off the record. Does that imply that when you see each touring cycle almost like a mini era in itself, where this is the main album from this tour cycle, this is the set list, has to reflect that, a lot of new songs is sort of invested in that? How does that affect your view of the set list and appealing to that audience for that particular tour cycle for you guys?
I mean, we always, I mean, we have our own opinions, like, of what songs we should play and what songs individual guys like to play in the band or don't want to play. But like, at the end of the day, I think Fit tries to build a live set list with like, what do people want to hear from us right now? You know, like, what are kids talking about? What are people interested in coming to see? Like, what's going to make people want to go see us, you know? And that usually revolves around new music. When you just release a record and you're picking up new fans, and, you know, there's excitement around new material. So it's like, we obviously, when we're releasing an album, of course, we're going to play new songs off of it and try to work that into our set. And then we kind of see what sticks around. You know, over the years, there's been live songs for us where it's like, oh, that wasn't necessarily what we ever thought was going to be the big song off that record, but it's like, oh, this song's working great live, people enjoy it, so that one sticks around, you know. And we experiment with switching up songs in our set and things like that. But generally, like, we just try to give people what they want to hear from us when it comes to a live show, you know.
And if I've done my research correctly, Will, this is one of the few, if not the only, Fit For An Autopsy record that has been recorded in different time frames, specifically for Joe's vocals, like in multiple sessions.
Yeah, we had time. That was the difference. You know, like, we knew we were gonna have this like way wide window before we would have to get the record in and things like that. And there were no tours, like, kind of bookending a recording session or anything like that. So I was like, well, I would rather work on the music, have it kind of get some of that in the bag, and then be able to sit on it, write lyrics. We were able to take more time and split stuff up. Joe didn't have to like sit around for weeks while we were working on other things and stuff. So it was just easier to break it up into a couple sessions this time.
Were there any moments that were captured that you thought, wow, we literally wouldn't have captured this moment if it was 2017 and we were recording in the normal fashion? Or any that you can remember? Obviously, you produce a lot of records, but is there any moment you remember thinking, wow, this would not have happened if we were doing this in 2019 because we wouldn't have done this extra session?
I think, I'm not sure. I think I definitely didn't really settle for anything. Not that I maybe would have in the past, but I did get to like have a second go at some of the stuff, or like think about lyrics, or not just commit to a part right away. If I was like, maybe this could be better, and sit on it. So that probably yielded different results. You know, I don't know if the first ones were worse. Like, it did let the record change, you know, having a little more time. Which probably wasn't a bad thing. I mean, I don't think it was a bad thing, because obviously all the decisions I made, I think were for the better, you know, but yeah, sure. Like being able to reflect on something a little longer can be good, could be bad too, I guess. I know, you know, some bands for sure. I know there's a point of diminishing returns where it's like, okay, now you're just assessing, you might actually be doing damage to the music, but I don't think we got there or anything. So yeah, nothing specific where I was like, wow, this never would have happened. I think it was just more like, the time was a benefit to just improve tiny details and strengthen the songs.
Awesome.
On that, I want to stay on the album while we're sort of talking about it. Me and Chris both really like it, really love it at the moment. It's really terrific. But listening to it, features not just classic sort of deathcore tropes that you kind of expect to hear from Fit For An Autopsy, but there are moments where you stretch beyond that. You know, there's moments of real atmosphere, there's melodic sections, there's riffs on this that completely remind me of different bands in different worlds entirely. The opening of Far From Heaven, me and Chris are talking about Gajira, when we see listen to that introductory riff about the way that the riff sort of slides across the guitar. How natural were those shifts during the writing process? Or was it a deliberately conscious focus to go a bit further than maybe you had done previously? Or was it just a natural process and one follows the other, and then you're in this room now writing wise while you were producing the record? Or was it like you went in with like a vision for how this record would sound?
I definitely have like themes when I want to start a record. It's like, okay, I know I'll just get inspired from time to time and be like, oh, I want to try to write a song that feels like this, or like I want a mood that's like this, but I don't really, until I like actually, those don't always make the cut, because if I can't get a song there where I feel like I'm doing what I want, I'll just try something else, you know? So I definitely wrote more songs this time around than I probably had in the past. So there was a lot of stuff that I was like initially like, oh, I think we're going to do something like this. It's going to be cool. That it wound up just not happening on this album. So it's more like through the writing process, that natural progression of how things go is like when I can start to see things coming together, but it's not very calculated beforehand, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of like your workload and the amount of different projects that you take part in, I kind of consider you to be like the Max Cavalera of like hardcore and deathcore, just constantly flooding with something new. You're either writing, mixing, producing, touring, etc. Has the amount that you're constantly exposed to music ever forced you to need to take a step away for a while? Because I'm going to be honest, Will, I mentioned this to you before we came on air. Over the last 4 years, most of mine and Sam's favourite albums have been produced by you. And me and Sam are always joking about like one day Will Putney will have a day off. Has there been a moment like for yourself where you've felt like you've been forced to take a step away from music for just to give yourself a break for once?
It's never been that bad, you know, like it gets overwhelming at times, but it passes, you know. I don't think I haven't hit that point where I'm like, I gotta stop doing this for a while. You know, it's been a while. It's been a long time. Like maybe in like 2016, there was like a bit of a scheduling mishap with some stuff getting like almost double booked unintentionally. I hit this like really crazy stretch where I was like, all right, this is too much, you know. And then we kind of changed up our workflow a little after that and stuff. But not really, you know. I do want a day off, but it's not like I need one yet, I guess, you know. And like honestly, like the downtime of COVID, like we had a ton of work over the pandemic because it's what everybody did. They just made records and stuff. But it was a lot of mixing because bands were recording at home or remotely, or there were several projects where I was slated to kind of produce that I wound up just mixing the records because international bands and things like that, we just couldn't hook up, you know? So it created these like little pockets of downtime. Mixing in a way is a bit of a break because even though I'm working, I'm on my own schedule. It doesn't feel like I'm being dragged through a process or anything like that. So I find like ways within the work to make it relaxing enough where I'm not fully burnt out, you know.
Just before Sam comes into the question, just something you said that kind of sparked something in my brain there. You take such an active role when you're a producer. Like, I don't think I've ever read an interview or spoken to a band that have said, oh, Will just kind of sat there while let us make our decisions, and we played the music and Will captured it. You're always such an actor. You're like the fifth or the sixth proverbial member when you are producing. Is there ever a moment where you've been like, I wish the band came to me with the music fully finished? Because again, you were taking that extra step. You are the fifth or sixth member.
Yeah, I mean, the better the starting point is, the easier my job is, for sure. You know, like I definitely, yeah, I mean, that's part of why I try to work with specific bands, because I think they're just great bands. And it's like, well, this is just going to be fun then, and not like this crazy uphill battle, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I've definitely had records when they started where I was like, God damn it, this is going to be so much work to get it right, you know, for various reasons, you know, whether it's like the players aren't there or the songs aren't there, but it's definitely, I mean, the better it is to start, obviously, I would greatly prefer to just walk in the room and be like, this is awesome, we're done, great, I'm going to go get lunch, you know, but yeah, it's like, you know, I mean, it's never going to be one thing. So I've just like come to terms with that. Like sometimes it's going to suck and sometimes it's going to be easy, you know? So it's like part of it is, you know, I think working through some stuff that needs a lot of help sometimes helps keep your brain fresh anyway, you know, because I don't want to be the guy that just sits there and hits record, no matter how cool the band is or how good the songs are. So it's like, I don't mind doing it. I wouldn't want to do it every day of my life, you know, like walk into bad records, for lack of a better word. But, you know, it's part of it. It's why, you know, it's why people are interested in working with me too, I think, because, you know, there's sort of a trust that like, I'm not going to let you make garbage, you know?
Awesome. Yeah, I fully believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Pew's just set me perfectly up for this next question. I did a little bit of internet research because there is a Wikipedia page called Albums Produced by Will Putney, and it's about Lord of the Rings length. I don't know if you knew this, but there are 62, not including Fit For An Autopsy's new one. There are 62 albums on there. Well, 62. I don't think I've listened to 62 albums in the last 2 years. But
there's more than that for sure. Somebody's got to update that.
there's 62 that Wikipedia know about. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's other ones lying out there in the ether. But what I wanted to talk about, obviously, Chris has just sort of asked you. You sort of hinted at the idea that you love it when you go in and the writing process is really, really great, and you want to be involved. And I wanted to ask you of those 62 or even 92 or 162, which is probably more likely, albums that you've been involved with, is there a writing process that stands out as particularly memorable to you? Is there a writing experience that you look back on almost? And I assume that you're very much in the present and forward thinking onto the next project, but is there a writing process or a band or an album that you kind of look back on and think that was an incredible experience, more so than some of the others?
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a particular one, but I do, you know, when I can do live pre-production with bands, I do have a lot of fun with that. You know, nowadays, like bands, you know, a lot of bands write in the computer, they have their laptop, they make their demos kind of in the box, and it doesn't necessarily ever get broken out into like the full band jam or rehearsal. And then when we get to pre-production, sometimes bands aren't even ready to do that yet because it's like one or two guys that write the music. It's all living in a laptop. They haven't rehearsed together as a band. You know, it's sort of the way of the world in some of these scenes now, where, you know, that we're working in a computer at the beginning of the record. You know, and then there are other bands where they write as a whole band. They're in a room together all the time, and all the changes they're all kind of up to speed on what's going on, and they can play all the songs right off the floor. And those pre-production sessions are usually more fun for me, and it's cool because it adds, like, there's a lot of other stuff you can do. You're more aware of how this really translates on playback, and you know, I've been able to do that with a lot of bands, but like Counterparts and Knock Loose and Every Time I Die, Vane, like when I get to be in the room with the whole band and hear how it's really gonna sound from like a live perspective and stuff, it kind of sparks more ideas, and it just feels more fun to me. So any of those are probably like more of the highlight ones for me.
I got into I got into Fit For An Autopsy around the Absolute Hope, Absolute Hell era, around 2015. And the progression the band has made since then is really, really cool to see, like, from the fan perspective. And I think that What the Future Holds, like, is pound for pound the best record the band has made. And you've never made a record that I haven't liked, but I think What the Future Holds is really, really great. And for yourself, because your position in the band is quite unique compared to other acts around deathcore, hardcore, etc., because of the importance that is rested on your shoulders in bringing the artistic vision to life, not just in terms of the writing, but in terms of the genuine creation of the record, do you almost take possibly more pride in what Fit For An Autopsy have sonically achieved than you would have if you were a 24/7 member and someone else was producing, if that makes sense?
I think it would be the same, you know. I think I'm doing something with the band every day, you know, because we're like, I handle a lot of the business side of it and stuff, and I'm like a part of all the processes and things that go into it aside from being on stage. So I don't feel disconnected in any way to it anymore, you know. But I think, you know, I would feel the same way, because if people react to the music I write positively, to me, it's like the same emotion. You know, obviously I'm not on stage to perform, so I feel like I miss out on some of that sort of reward for being in a band, you know, but because that I do love playing live shows. It's just not a thing that I could do full time and record full time, you know. So if I was out there, I'd probably be enjoying all the success that the record receives more, you know, I guess in that sense. But I'm just happy that people like the stuff we write and, you know, the message behind the band and stuff. So it's like, as long as that happens, I'm good either way, you know.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about like Fit For An Autopsy, but also the sort of extreme metal scene in general, because me and Chris have been talking about this really about 18 months. It feels like we're going through quite an exciting time for extreme metal in general, quite a purple patch of great records across. Just I was making, as part of this question, I was just like thinking, how many bands have we reviewed over the last few months that have just had great albums, last 18 months, you know, from Shadow of Intent, Lorna Shore's EP, Slaughter Prevail, Cognitive Desire, Pupil Slicer, Knock Loose, Die Art. And then you've got older bands like making triumphant returns, like we reviewed At the Gates, which was really good, Cannibal Corpse, Carcass, etc. You're probably best positioned to answer this question, given your resume, given your production and your prolific nature of your work. Do you agree, first and foremost, that it feels like a special time at the moment for extreme metal? And if so, do you think there's a particular reason why the music appears to be so good, happening so often, and just mass of great bands seemingly every few months?
I think stuff that always comes in waves, you know. I think obviously bands having 2 years off probably turned up a lot of really cool records, you know. I'd imagine we're about to get a lot of great music this year, you know, because what the hell is everybody doing last year? You know, everyone's writing music, recording records and stuff. So like, yeah, it's gonna be like this nice little boom for extreme music, where it's like, you know, all these guys that normally would have been busier now probably just make cool records, you know. So I'd imagine we're gonna see a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think with any scene, like a band will show up, they'll do something cool. A lot of bands will try to copy it. Stuff will get a little stale for a while, and then there's always something else that comes along that sort of resets it a little bit. And you know, with like the younger generation of extreme bands, there's definitely head-turning bands now, you know, bands that are switching it up a little. Things are getting more interesting again. So I think we're on the way into like a pretty good year of music for sure.
Dude, we could talk to you all day, but we wouldn't put you through that trauma. Dude, thank you so much for your time, man. This was the coolest thing. Obviously, a producer that we've looked up to for a long time, and everything that you touch seems to be gold. So you didn't have to speak to us with a crazy schedule, but you took the time to, and that's the coolest thing. So thank you so much, Will.
No problem, guys. I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for checking out the record. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Cheers, man. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.